Talk of adapting Mystery Science Theater for the big screen actually began in 1993, when Joel was still the host. Paramount executive Brandon Tartikoff was interested in a cinematic release, but he wanted it to be an origin story about how Joel came to be on the Satellite of Love and how he made his bots. I don't know about you, but I would love to see that. However, I understand completely why Joel would have absolutely no interest in a project like that. Also, Paramount wanted complete creative control and the option to recast anyone they wanted. Joel shot Tartikoff down, and the entire Best Brains team supported him. However, Jim Mallon, MST3K producer and puppeteer for Gypsy, was still determined to make MST3K, the movie, a reality. In October of 1993, Joel stepped down from the role of host, stating in his initial press release that it was to follow other creative pursuits. But as time has gone by, he's admitted the real reason he left was creative tension between himself and Mallon, specifically over MST3K, the movie. And while he would have continued to host if he could, he was more concerned about keeping the show alive and thought his departure was the best way to ensure that happened.
Hey, see you later. Sorry, folks, I can't come back.
Joel was succeeded as host by Michael J. Nelson, who was apparently originally hired onto the show to do...
They needed some typing, and I was lured away from a lucrative position at TGI Fridays.
His talent for comedy and musical skills made him a hit with the Best Brains, and by season 2 he was the head writer, making several cameo appearances on the show before taking over as host. For the most part it was business as usual until 1996 when the show fell into a bit of trouble. Comedy Central had no intention of continuing to support MST, only releasing 6 episodes in its 7th season and intending for the season 7 finale, Laser Blast, to be the series finale. There was talk that the Sci-Fi Channel might pick up the show, which thankfully did happen, and MST returned the following year. But in the meantime, there was Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie. Jim Mallon did say that the best thing about MST3K, the movie, was that it ensured all the Best Brains still had jobs during the tremulous final years of the Comedy Central era and the transition to the Sci-Fi Channel. That's pretty faint praise. Well, to be fair, yes, it is a good thing they had a project that could keep them together when it looked like they could be torn apart. And Tom Servo puppeteer Kevin Murphy even called it a great unifying experience for the whole team when they really needed it because, well, the Best Brains have made no secret of their disdain for this project. Everyone involved has complained that it was far and away the least satisfying process they were ever a part of, and no one seems particularly proud of the final product. It's easy to understand. Working out of their tiny garage in Eden Prairie, the Best Brains had free reign over Mystery Science Theater, the TV show. They could make the jokes they wanted to make and put on the skits they wanted to put on, and if a joke was too esoteric for the general public, well, that was just too bad. Working with a big studio gave them access to more money and a larger studio space, and yes, the bigger sets are impressive and beautiful, but there was definitely an air of resentment that people who'd never worked on the show before suddenly had creative authority over the little team that made MST so great every week. Also, I love that one of the selling points in the trailer was, now Mike and the bots can riff without a censor! Like, suddenly being able to swear was this huge new freedom for the cast, while Universal simultaneously restricted them in almost every creative way possible. The experiment had to be a Universal picture. It had to be in color. It had to have a fairly high production value.
That last one baffles me. If you're familiar with the show, you know that the quality of a riff is typically inversely proportional to the quality of the movie that week. It makes sense, right?
A movie that looks fairly good and has a relatively interesting story is not going to provide as much comedy as one that looks like it was shot in the dark and has an incoherent plot.
Wouldn't it be great if we knew who they were, where they are, or what they were doing?
Pretty much.
This Island Earth is very dated and very cheesy, but considering the usual fare you see on any given episode of the show, it's a masterpiece. It looks good, the effects are decent, the actors are competent, it has a clear story, and the characters are compelling. Exeter in particular has a great arc and interesting motivations. What's more, every movie featured on MST3K had to be cut for time, but the Best Brains always took care to preserve the story of the original film so the audience would know what was going on. It also helps stave off the critics who could easily say, well, yes, but that scene was taken totally out of context. Remember, this Island Earth had a runtime of 87 minutes all on its own. It had to be squeezed into Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie's 73-minute screen time while still allowing 18 minutes for the host segments.
Let's be clear. This Island Earth is not a timeless classic, but it ain't no Castle of Fu Manchu.
It's more along the lines of Starship Troopers, sci-fi cheese but campy and fun and not really hurting anyone. Which, lest we forget, is the point of the experiments, to force a man marooned in space to watch a movie so bad it breaks his mind. This island Earth is just not the one to do the trick. But MST3K, the movie, is just not on the same wavelength as the show. Not in terms of the riff, and not even in terms of the host segments. It kind of astounds me that so many pains were taken to make the riff more accessible to a general audience, and then obscure references to some of the worst movies featured on the show were peppered throughout the host segments. The segments in the movie are more tepid and less obtuse than the ones in the show, in order to appeal to a wider audience. But really, what joy would you get out of them if you didn't already know who these characters are? Why would you enjoy getting to see other parts of the ship besides the bridge, or get a kick out of the sheer insanity that is Tom Servo's bedroom, or get excited at seeing the theater hallway get a big fancy upgrade to being an actual hallway? How could you get anything out of any of that without at least some familiarity with and appreciation for the show it was based on? To add insult to injury, 2 of the best host segments were cut from the final product, all in the name of time. One of them involved Mike and the bots seeking refuge from a meteor shower by locking themselves in the ship's shelter. The shelter is hit and Mike's oxygen supply is compromised, so Gypsy, Crow, and Servo have to save him. It was awesome and heartwarming and a great character moment, giving the bots a chance to be more than just vehicles for making fun of bad movies. The entire scene was filmed, and then cut. Just like that. And that is to say nothing of the original ending to the movie, which had Servo distracting Dr. Forrester while Mike, Gypsy, and Crow devised a plan to get revenge on the mad scientist. Once again, it had the crew of the SOL working together as a team. It was full of the wit and sass of the show, and it tied everything in the riffs and the host segments together to bring the film full circle and make it feel complete. This ending was cut for being too long, and the one in its place is just a whole lot of nothing. The credits started rolling, and all I could think was, that's it? No, that can't be it. There has to be more. To be fair, Mike and the boss riffing over their own credits was a stroke of genius and the perfect way to end the movie. And yet, even that almost didn't happen.
Eastman. He came out of the east to do battle with the amazing Rondo.